my dad had been in the First World War, so it wasn't going to stop me. Secondly, you know, jobs were hard to come by those days, and I'd been working as a brickies labourer, so you know, after that, the RAF looked as though it could be a nice, easy job, because Japan wasn't in the war at that stage. I joined in, it was about April 1940, and that was, I wasn't even 18 then, I was only 17 at the time. But anyway, they accepted me, and in September, the following September, we were, they shifted to Singapore. The RAF, there was 21 squadron, 8 squadron and 1 squadron. 1 and 8 were I don't know whether I forget now whether they got rid of their old fabric-covered wings at that stage, but after we got established, they had the what were they, the light bombers, Hudsons, and Wirraways, of all things. You've heard of the old Wirraway? It's quite a relic now, but that's what we took over there. It was an ex-RAF drone, probably still, you know, they still owned it, but we were billeted there and operated from there. And the stuff they'd left behind was obsolete, I should say, and anything you tried to use was a throwaway object almost. But of course that was about roughly when we went over there. It was roughly before, about 18 months before Japan came into the war, and I don't think they improved it much in that time. It was there, and you couldn't get anything else, so you made do with it. I went over there as I went over with 21 Squadron actually. I was on the old Strathallan, which was a boat well known around the coast area here. And we got there, as I said, I wouldn't try and put a proper date on it, but it was around about September 1940. Of course, you know, then in 41, the end of 41, we were, or the last half of 41, we were starting to get relieved. Quite a lot of the chaps come back round about September, October. They'd been relieved of duty, and a new lot came in. And I was supposed to be amongst the next lot to get relieved, but the Japanese put a stop to that. They hit us on the 7th of December 1941, the same time as they hit Pearl Harbor, and we didn't even know what had happened. I mean, we were only kids, you know, and 18-year-old kids. And we didn't really, I think some of them, including myself, thought that it was just an exercise, you know. And but of course we still had to do as we were told. Raced out and jumped into all the slit trenches at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it was no no exercise. It was fair dinkum, and actually in the slit trench next to me was a young bloke that I knew quite well, and he was the first one, actually. I would say he was the first one of our unit that got killed in the war. He got a direct hit on his slit trench, and it was it sort of sobered us all up very smartly. That young bloke, he was from here to the wall away from me that got killed in the first raid. Never even seen the war. And the terrible thing is, as from my point of view, I can't remember his name now. I knew him quite well, but I can't remember his name. I remember looking it up on the wall in Canberra one time when I was there, and but no, there's not much more I can tell you about it. But of course it took over because we were getting bombed all the time. And as fast as we filled holes in so that planes could take off, they'd come over and blow them up again. In the end, it was almost continuous, the bombing of the drone. And at that time, I was driving the old crash tender. Well, it was obsolete too. It was an old Albion with a gear stick on the running board. That goes back a long way, but it was something that had been left behind there, and we had to use it. It was pretty ineffective, and I got, it was rather disappointing because had we had more up-to-date equipment, we might have been able to do a bit more, but it was, we didn't. And then, of course, it got to the stage where they couldn't, even if they got the planes off early in the morning, they couldn't get back and land on the drone there. We were told one night, we're moving in the morning, and we had to be all ready, of course, and they took us into Singapore Harbour, which was obviously had been bombed pretty heavily, and because you could just the smell of the place and that, and we put us on whatever boats were available that would float, and took off. We didn't even know where we were going, but we ended up in Palembang, which is the oil Dutch oil refineries were there, and 2 or 3 days in there, and then we were taken out to a strip just off the highway. It was roughly about 40 miles out of Palembang, I suppose. And things get a bit hazy after 75 years. And but we operated there for a while with the Hudsons. I don't think any of the they had changed over to Brewster Buffaloes at that stage for the fighter for 21 Squadron. But the 8 and 1 were still using the Lockheed Hudsons, and they just suddenly they got a few of us together, said, "Pick up your rifles, get out on the road, and make a. You've got to, if you've got to make a stand, while we sort of do all the demolition work on the drone before we leave." which was, and so there was 27 of us out on the road with, and all we had was World War I Lee Enfield rifles and one old Lewis machine gun, which was renowned because it only fired 6 shots before it jammed. So, so that was it. So I mean, they wouldn't have even changed step going past through us. I was, as I said, sent over with 21 Squadron. Then I was put into transport, which was a headquarters, part of a headquarters unit in Singapore. So, you know, well, when I got put into transport, the next thing I knew, I was driving the old crash tender, and it never worked too well. I can't tell you any heroic things that happened in that, I'm afraid. The crash tender was, they sprayed foam, but I never got trained on it or anything. I just told you, well, you can drive the crash tender. I had to learn myself how to drive it because it was too ancient for me to even know all about. You know, as most young blokes, I knew a bit about cars, but this was too old for me. But anyway, I sorted it out, and we, as I said, got it. But all the hoses were perished and used to blow, and all that sort of thing used to happen. The equipment was left there at the airport when the RAF left. It was just obsolete. I was driving a little van doing reconnaissance backwards and forwards, and so we started, it must have been about 24 k's or something like that, into the railhead, and we were picking up doing a shuttle service, taking all the blokes into this rail service, and a railhead, I should say, and when we finished, they said, right, you can go and find yourself a post on one of the flat trucks now. I looked at them and there wasn't a space where you could hang your legs over the side even. And I was driving this little van that I'd been shuttling backwards and forwards. So I said, oh, that smart, smart fella, smart lad. And I decided to there was a bit of a convoy taking through with the trucks. I decided to hang on to that. But what I didn't do was remember that it should have been filled with petrol before I left. So I only got out about 20 or 30 k's, and of course I run out of petrol, and I'm on the back of the line, so I got left for dead. However, it was, I thought, well, I don't know what's going to come along next, It could be the Japanese, because they use whatever vehicles were handy to do scouting sort of activities. And so I didn't know whether to hide or hail them. So I thought, well, it's not going to get any better, so I'll hail them. Anyway, it was 5 Indonesian priests were in the car, and I couldn't understand them and they couldn't understand me, but I hopped in with them anyway, and I was keeping my eye on the sun to see that I was going in the right direction, and I caught up with the trucks and and we took off from Surabaya. We had to go through the Sunda Straits and to get back to Perth, of course. And anyway, we were timed it so that we'd be going through it to dead night. And anyway, we had engine trouble, so instead of going through it to dead night, we went through at 10 o'clock next morning. Fortunately, never saw a thing. It was supposed to be alive with Jack Subs, but they hadn't either got up or weren't active that day. Anyway, and of course we didn't do the usual shipping lane. We headed southwest. So right for about 5 days, I think it was, and then we turned and went towards Fremantle. But, that was the way I got back. That's my experience with it. Talk about heroes, but we were just frightened kids, nothing else. And it wasn't. It's, now when I think back and I think, oh, God, they were all just 18, 19 years old, just about, well, all the ones that the ones that were doing services on the aircraft and that, they were all young blokes that had just come out of a school and were doing that, and they'd all more or less gone through about the same time as I did, and so and as I say, I know I was scared stiff and terrified, in fact, but you had no choice. You just had to keep going, and that's about it. And it's probably enough too. You've probably heard enough.